The past year for the 76ers has been up and down to say the least. Between Joel Embiid emerging as an MVP caliber player to the Ben Simmons saga, there have been a lot of narrative changes for this team since last summer. But what if I told you a league-changing move for the 76ers could happen very soon? You guessed it, I'm talking about James Harden of the Nets, and to say that the rumors and reports about this massive trade are heating up is an understatement. Today we have to talk 76ers, in particular taking a look at why this team could very well make a blockbuster move for James Harden, all the evidence that indicates this will happen, and the trade package that could get the deal done. But before we get into that, we're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before my birthday in February, so if you enjoy the content, it would be absolutely clutch if you subscribed if you're new and join the Woods crew. But with all that being said, let's get right into the recent news surrounding James Harden and the 76ers. After Harden was traded from the Rockets to the Nets, it seemed as though the 76ers missed their chance at a once-in-a-generation type offensive player. After all, the Nets already had two stars in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, so they were bound to form a big three and stick together for at least a handful of years, right? Well, despite this being the thought at first, over the past year things have changed in a big way, which has led many to believe that James Harden could leave Brooklyn this summer, and a recent report by Mark Stein confirmed this to be true. According to multiple sources including Mark Stein, James Harden is quote open to relocating, which in turn has fueled trade rumors heading into the deadline, but more than likely next summer. Now, is there a chance that this is fabricated in some way, shape, or form? Definitely. But honestly, after taking a look at how James Harden's experience with the Nets has been so far, I wouldn't be surprised if he's open to relocating, as Stein said. Since joining Brooklyn, not much has been going right for this team. Sure, they were dominant when the big three first came together, but since then, the Nets had a failed playoff run due to injury, and James Harden has been left to play without KD for a few weeks, and only play with Kyrie Irving in road games. The whole situation has been shaky for the Nets and Harden, and for someone who likely thought they'd be joining one of the best basketball teams of all time, James Harden is likely disappointed and slightly frustrated to say the least. Now, don't get me wrong here, Kevin Durant suffering multiple injuries in the past year cannot be blamed on anything, but the fact is, KD being in and out of the lineup, especially in the playoffs, will make it a lot harder to win at the highest level, which could be one of the main reasons why this Harden news is starting to leak out. But even if Harden isn't thinking about leaving because of their unstable roster, it is very clear that he is uncertain about his future with the Brooklyn Nets because of his contract situation. If you didn't know, James Harden was offered a huge contract in the month of October, but he declined it. At the time, many believed that this was no big deal, and Harden himself even came out and said that he was just trying to get physically healthy and not focus on money. But I can't help but think that Harden might have had other motives. At the time of the extension offer, it was also announced that Kyrie Irving would not be allowed to play with the Nets, so there's a good chance that Harden saw what was happening and he knew the Nets' big three could collapse sooner rather than later, which in turn incentivized him to put off his extension. Now though, things have gotten even worse. Kevin Durant is injured again and will be out for at least a month and a half, and as mentioned, Kyrie Irving is only playing in the road games. If Harden believes that what is happening now is a preview for the future, there's a good chance that he leaves the Nets in search of a more stable, winning team, which is exactly where the 76ers come in. It is no secret that the 76ers have been eyeing James Harden for some time now. Aside from the Nets, the 76ers were one of the other top teams in the Harden sweepstakes last year, but unfortunately, as you all know, they weren't able to acquire him because they didn't want to trade away Ben Simmons. Looking back, I'm sure this team is filled with regrets, but that may turn around soon if the franchise is able to pull off a monster move and bring the beard back to Philly. Now I'm sure you're wondering, why are the 76ers frontrunners in this hypothetical James Harden scenario? Well, a lot of this comes down to where the team is at and what assets they have. But with that being said, let's get into all the reasons why the 76ers are the perfect fit for Harden and a huge three-team trade that could happen next summer. The Harden 76ers move goes way beyond the roster because if you didn't know, the 76ers president of basketball operations Daryl Murray was with Harden in Houston, and he has made it very clear that he would like to reunite with the Beard in the future. Obviously, Murray wasn't able to build around Harden and win at the highest level with the Rockets, but this team came very close, which has led me to believe that Murray wants another shot at it in Philly. During his time with the Rockets, Daryl Murray only had the chance to pair Harden with elite guards such as Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. I'm not forgetting about the Dwight Howard experiment, but at that point in his career, Howard was far from what Embiid is right now. The point is, James Harden has never played with an MVP caliber big man, and it is very clear that Murray thinks this duo would shock the league and dominate at the highest level. Since losing to the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals, the 76ers just seem like they're stuck and need a major upgrade. When Jimmy Butler was on the team and Joel Embiid could be a second option at the time, it was very apparent the 76ers were a championship caliber team, and the same is likely the case for James Harden. But we get it, Harden would be a great fit on the 76ers and make them true contenders if Embiid is healthy, but how exactly would this deal get done, and is it even realistic if Harden wants out? Well, this is where things get tricky. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets won't be trading James Harden at the deadline because of the fact that they could win it all this year, but if things go south in the playoffs and this team does anything less than making the finals, we could see Harden leave this team during the 2022 offseason, and in this case, the Nets would likely do a sign and trade so they don't have a bad locker room and lose Harden for nothing. Where things get interesting is the alternative option, because Harden could opt into his deal and force his way out of Brooklyn as he did with the Rockets. Normally, I would say there is no chance of this happening, but it would help the 76ers in regards to salary cap because they would only be taxed in the case of a sign and trade, not a regular one. So if Harden chooses to opt into his deal, it would make it a lot easier for the 76ers financially. Not only that, but we've seen Daryl Murray pull off something very similar in the past when he convinced Chris Paul to opt into his contract and then get traded to the Rockets. Regardless, if the 76ers want to make this move happen, as all the reports have hinted at, they will have to work hard to open up cap space and avoid the tax, because saying that this team is in a bad spot is an understatement. But there are a couple of ways that they can make this work. Option A is the least ideal for the Sixers, but it would get them the beard and not cost them a whole lot. In this case, whether it's a sign and trade or regular trade, the Sixers would send off Ben Simmons in exchange for James Harden. This alone wouldn't clear up enough cap space though, because Simmons and Harden have a nearly $13 million contract difference. So the 76ers would also have to throw in Danny Green or waive him if the Nets don't want him. For someone like Harden, this is an absolute steal, but keep in mind, this only happens if the beard wants out and puts the Nets in a position where they're scrambling to get anything back for Harden. Option B in my eyes is the most realistic and beneficial to the 76ers because in this deal, the Sixers would get rid of Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. Now, don't get me wrong here, Tobias Harris is a great overall basketball player, but plain and simple, the man is overpaid. I view Harris as someone like Andrew Wiggins. Sure, they're overpaid, but on the right team, they could thrive and be somewhat worth the money if the team is contending for a championship. Now, obviously, Harris is on another level compared to Wiggins because he makes almost $10 million more per year. But if the Sixers were able to trade him in a 3-team trade, this would open up cap space for Harden without having to give away any role players, which would be ideal for this team because nearly all their role players provide elite value. If I'm being honest, in my eyes, there is no way that the Nets take on Harris's salary, especially with their win now plans. But I think that there are a few teams that would be willing to get involved and help the 76ers out. As far as 3-team trades, I created 2 mock trades that would get the 76ers Harden and allowed them to trade both Simmons and Harris. Getting right into the first package, the 3rd team in this trade would be the Atlanta Hawks. It is clear that this team needs to change some things up and could be looking to shake up their roster due to locker room issues or a lack of winning. And well, Tobias Harris could very well be an addition they're interested in. In this monumental trade, the 76ers would receive James Harden and John Collins, the Nets would receive Ben Simmons and DeAndre Hunter, and the Hawks would get Tobias Harris, Shake Milton, and draft capital if needed from the 76ers. Obviously, there is a good chance that the Atlanta Hawks say they're fine with what they have, but they could also make a splash for someone like Harris if John Collins demands out, which at the moment looks like it could actually happen this offseason. The Hawks franchise has had the privilege of getting great young talents over the years, so they could be pressured into making a move if it means keeping Trae Young content. For the 76ers, this is literally the best possible trade for them to make. They get James Harden, who as mentioned is literally perfect for this team, as well as a stud power forward in Collins that could help this team win now and in the future. As bad as Harden wanting out would be for the Nets, they actually didn't get completely robbed in this trade. Ben Simmons has huge potential and could help win now, and DeAndre Hunter has great potential as well. Now, is this ideal for the Nets? Absolutely not, but if they get rid of Harden, this wouldn't be a bad option. Even though the first trade was with a team looking to win now, I also believe a 3rd team involved could be a rebuilding one, which is why for the 2nd mock trade for the 3rd team, I chose the Sacramento Kings. Getting right into the trade package in this deal, the 76ers received James Harden and Harrison Barnes. The Nets received De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, and the Kings received Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and cap filler from the Nets to make the money work. There is a lot to break down here, but on the 76ers side of things, they get the star they want in James Harden and Harrison Barnes, who will be a perfect replacement for Tobias Harris. Barnes has been on a bad team for a while, but at age 29, he has what it takes to contribute a solid amount on a contending team like the Sixers. For the Nets, this is basically a best case scenario for them. Sure, they lose Harden, but they get a great guard in De'Aaron Fox, who they would prefer over Ben Simmons, and even more shooting with Buddy Hield, who has made it clear that he wants out of Sacramento. I mean, just imagine the offense of this team with Hield and Harris shooting at the perimeter, Kyrie and Fox driving the lane, and KD, who can literally score from anywhere. It would be wild to say the least. Regarding the Kings, they get exactly what they need, good players that can help them shake up their roster. Simmons is a two-way beast that would be very interesting alongside Tyrese Haliburton, and they would also get Tobias Harris, who although is overpaid would be a great addition to help this team make a leap to win now. Given what the scenario would be if Harden wants out, this would honestly be as close to a win-win-win for all three teams as it gets. Regardless of what happens with James Harden, one thing is clear: the 76ers need to make some changes and get another star alongside Joel Embiid as soon as possible. And if that star happens to be James Harden, all I have to say is the league will be in trouble. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Woods out.